This is your boy Arkevious Armstrong, and this is Franklin Boulevard Media. Listen, your boy grew up in Gastonia, North Carolina in 1981, December the 17th. And what I can recall about the gas house, yes, listen, I remember the days when we gave it that name in the early 90s. Man, those times were fun, but bittersweet. I can remember a lot of the traumatic issues and experience that I encountered as a little boy. You know, through elementary, I didn't have that experience where I had friends where I grew up half of my childhood life. I bounced around a lot. My mom was dealing and battling with her own drug addiction. My father was dealing with his drug addiction as well. But I also can recall some of the fun things we used to do, like used to go to the park, Lineberger Park, or we used to go to Irwin Center, all the recreation centers where a lot of people used to play ball or be outside doing all type of stuff. I can remember those things, but my childhood experience in Gastonia, North Carolina was a challenging one. It was an experience that I can recall very vividly. You know, as a kid who struggled with his speech impediment, who battled with social anxiety and withdrew himself from a lot of social experiences because of the things that I struggled with and I was battling with. And I always thought people saw my struggles, those type of things that my mom was dealing with, that we was living in this house or that house or shifted around from relative to friends. So I kind of like withdrew myself from a lot of things when I dealt with people. But there were some things that I was battling with within myself as a little kid, with confidence, self-awareness, and those type of things. But just give you a little bit of backstory about me and what I experienced in Gastonia. Those things that I remember very vividly was the abuse, the physical abuse that I struggled with experiencing, not understanding why as a little kid that I had to deal with these things from a father who was battling with his own depression, PTSD. He went to Korea, he served in the army, and when he came back, you know, this was in the early 80s, where a man who was struggling with his drug addiction, alcohol. In those early days, he was a man who had to take care of 2 kids at the time. You know, at the time, I was a young boy, about 5 or 6 years old, and I had a baby sister around 4 years old, and, you know, left in a position to take care of kids while he was trying to discover who he was as a man. But at the same time, you would ask, like, where was the mother? My mom was also battling with her drug addiction. So as a kid, I experienced a lot of issues when it came to love and when it came to guidance and structure. I didn't have that. So I don't have that love story like so many people have. But I can recall that when I saw my friends who had those opportunities to have a father and a mother in the household, I wanted that. I yearned for it. And I was crazy because I can recall the same friends that I yearned to be in their shoes, they wanted to be in my shoes. They wanted to have that freedom to make their own decision and choices. Well, the choices I made as a kid wasn't because I wanted to, it's because I didn't have the structure or guidance. And so one thing I can recall too is when I was a young kid, when my mom was battling with her issues and her drugs, you know, dealing with molestation and physical abuse and mental abuse and psychological abuse from my parents, I recall starting to use drugs at an early age. At the age of 11, I started smoking marijuana and smoking cigarettes. And it kind of got worsened because, you know, I didn't have no one to monitor me. I didn't have no one to look over me or try to steer me in the right direction. And I recall starting to use drugs even more often to cope with a lot of my problems, a lot of my depression as an early age. And, you know, and I remember at 13 years old, I started messing with marijuana and cocaine and alcohol. And yes, I used to be in the 5th and 6th grade going to school, intoxicated, high off crazy stuff. Ryan Elementary, I can recall very vividly, I used to go to school high or maybe sometimes drunk and hungover in the 5th and 6th grade. And a lot of people who are in Gastonia remember those days, you know, and not understanding the damage and the trauma that I was causing to myself. And, you know, it got worse. You know, I started using drugs and started selling drugs at 12 and 13 years old. And one of the most dramatic issues happened at my life at 13 years old. I was facing 24 years to life. You know, and this time I always tell people that, you know, we have to understand the trauma that we pass down to our kids subconsciously or directly or indirectly. And I remember with my mom battling her drug addiction, my father battling with his drug addiction, I didn't have that stability. So I was only guaranteed to pick up some of the habits that I was around. And it was around gun violence, drug activity, drug selling, DSS, all of these type of things. So I didn't have that opportunity where I played sports and I have, my mom, she worked 2 jobs, my father worked 2 jobs, and me and my sister, we did our chores. No, that's not my story. My story is one of the stories that you look at some of the young people today and you ask, where is it going wrong at? What can we do to help? That was the young me. And so one of the things that I can recall when we was growing up, you had so many great people doing great things around us in Gastonia, but it just wasn't in my household. I had an opportunity to meet some amazing people like Sleepy Floyd when I was young. I remember when they had the Boogie Crank festivals. I remember the Boys and Girls Club. There was a lot of great people who was in positions to help the young Arkevious, but I didn't have that structure that helped me or allowed me to be in these positions like play organized sports. I didn't play football. I didn't play basketball. I was around drug dealers. I was around those who we saw shoot up drugs, smoke dope, or ran the streets. You heard gunshots at night. That was something that I experienced as a young kid. And so I adopted that. The people that I looked up to wasn't people who played sports. It wasn't educators. I didn't have people in my family that can say, hey, you're going to go to school and you're going to graduate, you're going to be something. No, the whole ultimate goal in my household was survival. Worrying about how you're going to eat the next day. Those type of experiences that I had to encounter where we didn't have running hot water sometimes. We didn't have lights in the house sometimes. So me escaping going to school was an escape for me to provide shelter, I felt like some type of love and some type of guidance from teachers, some teachers who catered to me, who saw some of the challenges that I was experiencing. They took me up under their wing, but they knew it was only a limit to the things that they could do at that time. And so one thing that I can recall that, education for me was a struggle. I told you I had a speech impediment and I struggled with talking. So I oftentimes shut down. I wouldn't talk. It's crazy because a lot of people, like I had somebody call me yesterday and, very well person known in Gastonia who grew up with me. And they was like, bro, every time I listen to your videos, I'm always in shock. How you articulate yourself and how you speak and how you're traveling and doing so many great things. But you was that kid that shut down or was disconnected from people in the classroom. And I recall those things because I was ashamed. I battled with depression. I was a kid who battled with his self-esteem because I didn't have the latest clothes or the latest shoes or, I knew my living conditions back home. I only came to school not to learn, but to have 2 free meals. And those type of things that I was struggling with because I thought people who knew me, they knew where I come from. They knew my situation. So I didn't want to bring no attention on myself. And so a lot of things that I would do to escape from learning was to act out. I would do things to get removed out of the classroom, or I would do things to get sent home, knowing if I got sent home, I didn't have structure there. I didn't have guidance there. I didn't have a parent who was going to punish me or discipline me. No, I had nothing there. So I knew that was my escape. When teachers challenged me, I buckled, I folded, I escaped. And so I felt like education for me wasn't something that I wanted to take on. So I wanted to be what I saw every single day, and that was be a part of the streets, be a part of the drugs activity and all the things that I witnessed. And so, I got up under those who I felt like was older, those who I can learn from. And trust me, it wasn't the best. You have people who get up under people who, as far as sports and educators, I got up under drug dealers. All these people who was doing these type of illegal activities, I was inspired by that. But fast forwarding, who I am today, and it's crazy because a lot of people ask, like, what happened? Experiencing the life sentence at 13 years old when you should have been playing sports. But fast forwarding, during 4 years, they sent me off to a maximum security youth prison in Raleigh. that is conjunction to an adult prison. If you had more time, right? If you had more time to serve, if you turn 18, they would walk you across the yard. So after going through all of these little pats on the hand and the little small little institution, from group homes to detention centers, I finally have graduated. So this was a big experience for me, but it was a life-changing experience because I was away from home. I was in an unfamiliar space and place where I didn't know the outcome. And I can remember all the fights I used to get into when I was in Butler, North Carolina at C.A. Dillon. I can remember all the things that I had to go through to prove myself. And I remember coming home at 17 years old, no structure, no guidance, no plan, no resources, only put back in the same environment around the same thing that I've always experienced, hoping and praying for a different outcome. It didn't happen that way. I adopted the same mentality, but 10 times worse. I started using pills and started smoking weed and drinking alcohol, committing crime after crime because I didn't have structure. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an action plan. I didn't have no guidance. I didn't have no one to say, you know what, I'm going to take you up under my wing. I was put back out there. And that's what a lot of young people today who don't have the resources, don't have the outlets, are put back in the same situation around the same people with hoping and praying for a different outcome. It don't normally happen that way. After I got out of prison the first time, I was released at 17 years old, and I was put back around the same thing, same people. And by the age of 19, I was faced with another horrific crime, and I was facing 35 years to life. And this incident, where I can recall where I committed a crime in broad daylight, I was surely guilty of it, and I knew what I did was wrong, but I didn't care. I didn't have the I care attitude. I didn't have no remorse, no compassion for life, let alone life in itself of my own. Like, I didn't care about nothing. And so I felt like that experience for me was an eye-opener, because now I'm learning my decisions that I'm causing, the decisions that I'm making, and the things that's happening to me, I'm causing it to myself. Regardless of what I experienced as a kid, regardless of what I went through as a kid, regardless of who did what, I'm at a point now in my life where the decisions that I'm making, I knew better, but I still didn't make the right choices. So I recall facing 35 years of life where I sat inside the county jail, and I ended up signing a 10-year plea. And I remember on that 10-year plea, I remember serving 8 years on that. And I remember going to Kentucky Federal Prison. And that was a life-changing experience for me, because people ask me, like, what happened? Where did you turn? Where did the 360 happen? Where did the light come on? In Kentucky Federal Prison, I was locked up around 3,000 men from all over the world, and people from all walks of life. But one thing happened. That one thing that happened in my life that made me turn my life around, that made me take a different path, I gave my life to Christ. A lot of people always ask me that. I remember in Kentucky Federal Prison, 2005, I gave my life to Christ. And at that moment, I said to myself, this is it. God, whatever you do with my life, I will follow. And ever since then, I never looked back. And what happened from that experience, for me giving my life to Christ, God gave me a purpose and God gave me a plan. But when I got released from prison, I made a commitment to myself that I would not look back, that I would not do this again. And I remember in 2005 when I got released, I said to myself, I don't know how this is going to work out, but God, I trust you. I don't know what I'm going to do, but God, I trust you. And again, I had to come back to Gastonia, North Carolina. Bittersweet. But I knew for a fact that what I needed to do for my life, it wasn't going to happen in Gastonia. So I moved to Mount Holly, which is outside of Gastonia, not too far, but it was a way. It was something different. It was a different environment. It was a different space, where I could feel like I can focus on my life and what I needed to do with my life. And so I recall very vividly when I came home, I said, I want to give back. I want to do more. And I remember mentoring. I was mentoring young men that was in Gastonia, but I wanted to do more. But I didn't know which direction to take. I didn't know who to ask. I didn't know what to do other than just talk and try to help redirect a lot of these young boys. And I went through some things. I experienced some things being homeless in 2008, losing everything, losing my job, losing my house. And I recall sleeping on my uncle's couch. And I was threatened by my parole officer at the time that, you have 21 days to give me a physical address. And I didn't have a physical address because I was sleeping on my uncle's couch. Some days I would sleep in my truck. I had clothes at my sister's house. And I'm asking myself, I know this is not what it's supposed to end up. I know this ain't how it's supposed to be. And I remember telling my parole officer, just send me back. I quit, right? This powerful young man who experienced all he has already experienced, quitting. This is the conversation I remember telling myself. You can't quit now. You told yourself that no matter what, you're going to keep moving forward. No matter what, you're not going to come back. So just because you're going through what you're going through, you ready to quit? You ready to throw the towel in? That's when I had a realistic moment with my life. That, do you expect this journey to be easy? And I told myself, I rose up to my feet. I said, you know what? I'm going to get back on my feet. I'm going to keep moving forward. And I always encourage people, listen, this journey, when you want to transition, when you want to change your life for the better, it's not going to be easy, right? So I had to have that realistic moment with myself. And I remember finding myself in and out of situations that was not the best, with women, with jobs, my living condition. So I was always making stupid choices, dumb decisions, and trying to figure it out. And life is like that. You're going to make dumb choices and decisions. You just have to figure it out. And so I recall when I said to myself, I need to get back to what I made a commitment to myself about. Like, start back giving back to the community. Start back mentoring young men. Get back into the church. Because I have read from the church, like the church was the very thing that helped me when I was incarcerated. But when I was going through what I was going through, I found myself detouring, getting off track, escaping. And so I remember I told myself, God, rekindle that fire that I used to have for you. Put back in me that desire to give back. And that's when I birthed it, Step Up to Leadership, which is a social development program for young boys from ages 12 to 17 years old. And that was a moment that I felt like I had something. God, I got it. And I knew what my life was panning out to be. I knew what I needed to focus on. And I knew this opportunity that God gave me was a second chance, not a freedom, but to get it right, to make something of yourself, to leave your mark, leave your legacy while you're here. And I'm so proud, despite of where I come from, despite of what I experiences, I know the traumatic issues and experiences that I experienced while I was in Gastonia, but I am a proud native of Gastonia to say, that's my hometown. But look where I come from and look where I'm at today. So to travel the world, to write books, to be on a platform and on some big stages and making so much change in the communities and stuff like that. Even coming back home to Gastonia, North Carolina, and creating a program to make a difference inside the jails. These things like that meant so much to me because I knew, despite of where I went through, despite of where I come from, is where you're going in life. So Gastonia, North Carolina has always been my home. And I am so proud to say that so many people who knew where I come from, knew what I went through, glad to say that I am seeing hope when I hear you. I am seeing an opportunity when I hear you speak. And these are people from my hometown. So when I come back home, despite of the bittersweet, it's good to see the look on so many people's faces who knew where I come from, what I experienced, because it gives them hope. That little kid from Gastonia, North Carolina, now is a profound speaker who's traveling the world, who has been to Miami, been to St. Thomas speaking, Minnesota, Chicago, Atlanta, Vegas, Dallas. Man, the list can go on and on. To be able to come from where he come from and to have opportunities to stand on a stage and use a voice that I used to be afraid to use, to articulate myself in a way that I was afraid to speak up, to sit at tables and in rooms with multimillionaires who can make big choices and decisions, and allow them to give me opportunities to be in a room and a table where they sit to make decisions. That ain't nothing but God. But to understand, to all of my people, despite of what you go through, despite of where you come from, Gastonia is my home. So I'm proud to say that regardless of what I went through, look who I became. Look what I am doing now. Despite of what happened, look what is happening in my life now. So I've always encouraged people from my own town, if you want to know what change look like, look at me, because I am you. And you can be me and even better. To see my hometown grow, you just have to adopt and to become accustomed with change. And I wish a lot of people understand that it's happening regardless if you like it or not. It's happening even if you're a part of it or if you're not. But I want you to understand, if change is happening around you, don't evacuate, be a part of change. And so when I ride down Franklin Boulevard, I see all the businesses. When I go downtown, I see all the businesses from big to small. Change is happening. And we have to understand change is good regardless if you like it or not. Gastonia is rising. And I'm telling you right now, when I come back home, I love to see that. I'm glad to see that it's thriving and it's growing and it's going to continue to grow. So again, man, if you want to follow me and be a part of the mission that I feel like God has me on, with motivating and inspiring and uplifting people, listen, follow me on Facebook. That's Arkevious J. Armstrong. Or even if you're on Instagram, that's ArkInspire81. If you're on LinkedIn, that's Arkevious Armstrong. Please follow me also on Twitter. That's Arkevious17. Please visit my website. That's arkinspire.com. Again, that's www.arkinspire.com, and you can see all the great things that I'm doing in the community, events that we got coming up, a lot of the things that we're doing not only in youth but as well as adults. Again, this is a big honor for me to be a part of Franklin Boulevard Media, to tell my story and to be a part of what Gastonia is becoming. Experiencing death in the family is hard for a lot of people. But this experience that my father ended up losing his life in 2002, it was hard for me to swallow that pill because I didn't have no emotions attached to him. I didn't have any feelings attached to him. But where I hurt the most at, to see my baby sister who had a relationship with a father. And those type of things only happen because of the experiences that I experienced with a man who I truly looked up to, but also I feared. It wasn't until later I realized that this man only did what he could, only could become what he saw. And as a father, I was realizing at the time, as a little boy, I was looking up to a man who had battled with so much depression, emotional trauma, physical trauma from his own father. So I recall a lot of the physical abuse, mental abuse, psychological abuse from a man who I looked up to. And it's sad to say that he never got the opportunity to see how his son turned out. But I also take the time out to say that my mom, who is still living today, I forgave her. All the things that I experienced as a little boy, all the trauma that I experienced, I held on to it. I used it to keep her and I disconnected. I used it to keep her and I distant because I wanted her to hurt. I wanted her to feel the pain that I felt. But I realized that wasn't something that I needed to hold on to. Given the opportunity to be in the shoes, to inspire people, change lives, motivate people, help people change their lives, and all of these things, and you holding on to this bitter, this hurt, this trauma. I remember at 36 years old, I apologized. I forgave her, not for her, but for me. I needed to heal. I needed to heal, but in order to heal, I needed to forgive. All of those things that happened to me as a little boy happened to me. It's okay to hurt, but it's not okay to hold on to it.